Welcome, everyone. Tonight we are kind of talking about what it means to do it all over again, to trust again, to love again, to rebuild again, and to start from the beginning after you thought that you had already done the healing, learned the lesson, broken the pattern, or finally found your footing. And there is there's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from having to begin again. And it's not just physical exhaustion. It is emotional, it is spiritual. It is the exhaustion of saying, I already survived this. I already learned this lesson. I already gave everything I had. Why am I back here again? And some of us are starting over after heartbreak. And some of us are trying to understand why we keep entering versions of the same relationship. Some of us are rebuilding after losing a person, a home, a dream, an identity, a community, or an entire version of ourselves. And some of us are sitting between, endings and beginnings where nothing feel, feels clear yet, And it's not really about pretending that starting over is beautiful because sometimes it is ugly. Sometimes it is lonely, and sometimes it feels unfair, and sometimes it feels like life has asked way too much of you. But tonight is also about the triumph inside beginning again, not the polished triumph, not the motivational quote version, the real triumph, the triumph of getting up when nobody clapped and choosing differently when the old pattern still felt familiar. The triumph of grieving what happened without, allowing to define everything on what happens next. Starting over doesn't mean that you failed. Sometimes starting over is proof that you finally stopped betraying yourself. So before I begin, I really just want you to think of your honest truths, of your real truths. Don't diagnose former partners or parents or friends or family members. This is for you to kind of understand yourself. Grab your pen and paper, write down what feels safe and honest, because sometimes the most respectful thing that you can do is to not only just tell the truth, but immediately, like, just sit with it, you know? Accountability is not the same as blame. Accountability asks, like, what happened to me? But it also asks, what did I participate in? What did I ignore? What am I responsible for changing now? And that's where our power lives. So, I want to begin with a simple question. When you hear the words starting over, what feelings come up first? It could be fear, anger, relief, hope, grief, embarrassment, freedom, confusion. Notice how starting over can hold opposite emotions at the same time. You can be relieved and devastated. You can know the ending was necessary and still miss what happened. You can be proud of leaving and still wish it had worked. And you can be hopeful about the future and still feel terrified of it. Emotional maturity means allowing more than one truth to exist. So, one of the hardest parts of rebuilding is the belief that we should be further along. People say things all the time like, I thought I healed this, or I thought I knew better. I can't believe I let this happen again. I should not still be affected. But, healing is not a straight line. You can understand a pattern intellectually and still be emotionally drawn towards it. And you can know someone is unhealthy for you and still miss them. And you can leave a relationship and still feel attached to the person. You can make progress and still have moments when the old version of you returns. That does not erase the work. The question is not whether the old feeling comes back. The question is what you do when it does. The healed version of you is not someone who never gets triggered. The healed version of you is someone who recognizes what is happening and responds differently. So if you do have your pen and paper, I want you to think back, to a time if you have ever judged yourself because you thought that you should have been over something by now. You know, what did that judgment make you do? Did it make you hide, return to the person, pretend to be fine, rush into another relationship, avoid asking for help, shame yourself? Shame rarely makes people heal faster. It usually makes them hide longer. I think something to think about is like why we repeat what hurts us. That's something that, can be very powerful to know that answer. Many people believe that Repeatedly, choosing the same type of relationship is because, people think they're foolish or weak or naive or broken. And that can be the answer, but it's a little bit too shallow. Like we repeat familiar patterns because familiarity often feels safer than uncertainty. And even painful familiarity can feel, emotionally predictable. And if you grew up earning love and chasing attention and managing someone else's emotions or even waiting for consistency, then calm love may not immediately feel like love. It may feel empty and unexciting and suspicious and too easy. And meanwhile, inconsistency may feel powerful, not because it is healthy, but because your body recognizes it. The nervous system often confuses recognition with safety. It says, I know this feeling. And then the mind translate that into, oh my gosh, this must be connection. And that's when we go into limerence. This is really the part where limerence becomes important because limerence can make us believe that intense longing is proof of deep love. It can make us obsess over a person who is inconsistent, unavailable, unclear, or emotionally unsafe. And it can make us create a future in our mind that the relationship has not earned in reality. So limerence says, this person is different. The connection is special, and nobody has ever made me feel this way, right? Paul said it. But intensity alone does not prove compatibility. Obsession does not prove intimacy. Longing does not prove mutual love. And sometimes that intensity comes from uncertainty. And sometimes it comes from emotional deprivation. And sometimes it comes from the part of us that wants this person to repair an old wound that they did not create and cannot heal. Starting over requires us to stop asking only, why did they do this to me? And really begin asking, why did this dynamic feel familiar enough for me to stay? So think about one relationship pattern that you have repeated, not necessarily the same person, but the same emotional experience. Were you waiting to be chosen? Were you proving your worth? Were you overfunctioning? Were you rescuing? Were you accepting confusion? Were you mistaking chemistry for compatibility? Were you hoping that potential would become reality? Were you afraid that leaving meant nobody else would come? So let's complete a sentence. And this is going to be like the pattern, beneath the person. I keep finding myself in relationships where I feel blank, uncertain, invisible, responsible, not enough, needed but not loved, chosen temporarily, emotionally alone. Any of those. And now complete this sentence. The first time I remember feeling this way was, and please, this is not about blaming childhood for everything. It's about understanding the emotional blueprint that you may still be following. Heartbreak is not always about the person. Sometimes we think that we're grieving a person when we're actually grieving several things at once. You know, we may be grieving who we thought they were, who we hoped they would become, who we were when we met them, the future we imagined, the time we invested, the version of ourselves that believed that this would finally be different, the apology we never received, the closure that we kept waiting for, the life that we thought that we were building. And this is why heartbreak can feel bigger than the actual relationship. You are not only losing what happened, you are losing what you believed could happen. And this is where limerence can complicate grief. When the relationship existed partly in fantasy, the loss can feel endless because fantasy has no natural, ending. Reality can end. Fantasy keeps rewriting the story. So, what are you grieving besides the person? The dream, the family, the home, the identity, the time, the hope, the version of myself that I lost? Sometimes healing begins when we name the correct loss. Rebuilding is not only about relationships. Some people are rebuilding after illness, financial hardship, death, divorce, abuse, addiction, betrayal, family estrangement, losing a community, losing a career, losing faith, losing the version of life that that you expected to have. There are losses that do not simply change your circumstances, they change your identity. You wake up and realize, I don't know who I am in this version of my life. And that can be terrifying, but it can also be honest because sometimes the identity that ended was built around surviving, pleasing, improving, and rescuing, or even enduring. When that identity falls apart, it may feel like you're losing yourself, but you may actually be meeting yourself without the role. So, what role have you outgrown? The rescuer, the fixer, the strong one, the peacemaker, the one who never needs anything, the one who waits, the one who forgives everything, the one who carries everybody, the one who keeps the family together. Roles can protect us, but they can also imprison us. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to make this one episode and then come back for part 2. And when we return, we're going to talk about what triumph actually looks like because it's not always dramatic, visible, or celebrated. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Facing the mirror, and I'll see you in the next episode.